Aries, let me ask you something. What if the pressure you're feeling right now isn't trying to break you, but trying to move you? Because lately, something feels off. Not loud, not dramatic, just that quiet knowing in your chest that says, I can't stay here anymore. You didn't imagine that, and you're not weak for feeling it. This message didn't find you by accident. It found you because your soul is already standing at the edge, and the universe is whispering, trust yourself, step forward. So before you scroll away, Aries, pause, breathe, and ask yourself this one question. What if this moment is the sign you've been waiting for? Stay with me. Aries, I want you to imagine I'm sitting right across from you right now. No crowd, no audience, just you and me in a quiet room late at night. The kind of quiet where thoughts finally speak. You see, the reason this doesn't feel random is because something inside you has already started to wake up. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like light slipping through a crack you didn't even know was there. You've been moving through your days on autopilot, doing what needs to be done, showing up, holding it together. And from the outside, it probably looks like you're fine. But there's been this subtle shift, a moment when the room feels smaller than it used to, when conversations don't land the same way, when your own reflection feels slightly unfamiliar, not wrong, just incomplete. That whisper you keep hearing, the one that says you don't belong here anymore, it's not trying to scare you. It's trying to be honest with you. Because Aries, you are not built to slowly fade. You are built to feel alive. And when life starts asking you to shrink, your soul responds by pushing back. You might have told yourself you're overthinking, that you're being dramatic, that everyone feels this way sometimes. So you quieted that inner voice and kept going, but it kept returning in quiet moments, in restless nights, in that strange heaviness you feel when the day ends and you ask yourself what all this effort is really for. This is where I want you to pause with me, right here. Because what's happening now isn't about failure, and it's not about loss, it's about alignment. You've outgrown a version of your life that once made sense, and that can feel disorienting, even painful, especially when you've invested so much of yourself into staying. There's a tenderness in realizing that the place you fought to survive may no longer be the place you're meant to stay. And I know part of you wants certainty, a sign so loud it leaves no doubt, a guarantee before you move. But growth rarely speaks in absolutes. It speaks in nudges, in patterns, in repeated feelings you can't shake. Right now, the universe isn't yelling at you. It's standing close, lowering its voice, asking if you're ready to listen. Because the pressure you're feeling is not here to punish you. It's here to remind you that your life is allowed to change. You don't need to have every answer yet. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. All that's being asked of you in this moment is honesty with yourself. And as we go deeper from here, we're going to gently uncover why this moment matters so much, why the discomfort has been building, and why, beneath all the uncertainty, there is something quietly powerful waiting for you to choose it. So, stay with me, Aries, not because I have all the answers, but because this story, the one that's unfolding right now, isn't finished speaking yet. Aries, stay right here with me for a moment. Because the thoughts that keep circling back to you lately, they're not noise. They're not random. They're not your mind spiraling out of control. They're visitors. They arrive quietly. Sometimes when you're driving. Sometimes when the house is finally still. Sometimes in the space between one breath and the next. And every time they show up, they carry the same feeling. A pull. A sense that something is waiting just beyond the edge of what you know. You try to reason with them. You tell yourself, it's not practical, not the right time, not realistic. So you push the thought away. And for a while, it works, but then it comes back. Not louder, just clearer. That idea, that path, that decision you haven't said out loud because once you do, it becomes real. Here's the part I want you to hear, Aries. Really hear. Intuition doesn't shout. It repeats. It speaks in patterns, in gentle persistence, in the same image returning again and again until you finally stop and listen. And the reason this feels unsettling is because your intuition is ahead of your comfort zone. You've been trained to trust logic, to trust proof, to trust what you can explain. But this isn't coming from your thinking mind, it's coming from a deeper place. The place that remembers who you were before you learned how to doubt yourself. Somewhere along the way, you started second-guessing your own inner voice. You started asking others before asking yourself. You started waiting for permission to want what you want. So, when a new vision appears, one that makes your heart beat a little faster, and your breath catch just slightly, your first instinct isn't excitement, it's hesitation. You wonder if you're being foolish, if you're reading too much into things, if this is just another passing thought. But Aries, the thoughts that pass don't stay. These do. They linger. They return when you're tired of pretending. They resurface when something inside you whispers, "There has to be more than this." This is how answered prayers often arrive, not as instant miracles, but as ideas that won't let go of you. You asked for clarity. You asked for direction. You asked for change. And now it's arriving in the form of a choice. That's why doubt shows up next. Not because you're wrong, but because the moment matters. Doubt is the threshold. It's what appears right before growth, right before a shift, right before you step into a version of yourself that no longer fits inside old limits. So if you've been questioning yourself lately, wondering why your own thoughts feel unfamiliar, why your inner world feels louder than usual, it's not because something is breaking, it's because something is opening. And as we continue forward together, we're going to look gently at why trusting yourself has become so difficult, what taught you to hesitate, and how to recognize the difference between fear that protects and fear that holds you back. For now, just notice this. The thought you keep returning to hasn't asked you to act yet. It's only asking you to listen. And that quiet space you're standing in right now, that pause between doubt and knowing, that's where the story begins to deepen. Aries, let me come a little closer here, because there's a weight you've been carrying that no one ever formally handed to you. You just picked it up, quietly, automatically. At first it felt like strength, like loyalty, like being the one people could rely on. So you said yes, again and again. You smoothed things over when tension showed up. You filled the gaps when others stepped back. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave because someone needed you to, because it felt wrong to disappoint. And Aries, you did all of that with a good heart. That part matters. But somewhere along the way, the balance shifted. What started as generosity slowly turned into obligation. What once felt purposeful began to feel heavy. Not all at once, just enough that you noticed it in your body, in the way your shoulders never fully relaxed, in the way your breath stayed shallow, in the way joy began to feel like something you had to earn again. You kept telling yourself it was temporary, that once this phase passed, you'd finally get to rest. But the phase didn't pass. It kept asking for more. And the truth is, Aries, you've been carrying responsibilities that were never meant to live on your back alone. You absorbed other people's expectations. You took ownership of outcomes you couldn't control. You stayed steady so others wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. From the outside, that looks admirable. From the inside, it slowly drains you. This kind of exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from misalignment, from giving your energy to places that no longer replenish you, from standing in roles you've already outgrown while pretending they still fit. That's why rest hasn't been fixing it. Sleep hasn't been enough. Time off hasn't reset you the way it used to. Because what you're tired of isn't the work, it's the weight of being everything to everyone except yourself. And there's no shame in that. Cycles have a lifespan, even meaningful ones. What once helped you grow can eventually become the very thing that limits you. This doesn't mean you failed. It means you listened long enough to notice the cost. Right now, something inside you knows this chapter has given all it can give. You can feel it in the quiet moments, in the way your spirit hesitates before committing again. That hesitation isn't resistance, it's wisdom. Because endings don't always arrive with noise. Sometimes they arrive as fatigue, as a gentle but persistent knowing that you cannot keep carrying this without losing something essential. And Aries, you are not here to slowly disappear under the weight of obligation. You are here to live with fire in your chest and clarity in your direction. What you're sensing now is not a collapse. It's a boundary forming, a natural limit being reached. And as that old structure begins to loosen its grip, as the pressure you've been holding starts to surface, something else quietly steps forward. Not chaos, not punishment, but a moment that asks a different question. One that doesn't demand sacrifice. One that doesn't require you to prove your worth. Just an invitation to notice what happens when you stop carrying what was never yours and allow life to respond. Aries, listen to me. There is a kind of mercy that does not feel gentle at first. It feels like tension, like pressure behind the ribs, like the world quietly rearranging itself while you are still trying to keep everything in place. And I know you have been trying. You have been holding your posture, holding your face, holding your words. So no one sees the part of you that is tired of pretending, but sometimes life notices what you will not admit out loud. Sometimes the universe watches you stay in a space that drains you, and it starts to loosen the ground beneath your feet. Not because you are being punished, not because you are broken, but because you are lingering in a chapter that has already ended. This is how it happens. A truth rises to the surface, not as a rumor, not as a vague feeling, as something real, something you cannot unsee. It could be a conversation that suddenly sounds different, a message that reveals what someone has been hiding, a moment when you realize you were giving loyalty to people who only loved your usefulness, a quiet betrayal, or a sharp one. Either way, it lands in the same place, right in your chest, and you sit there for a second, almost still, like your body is trying to understand what your soul already knew. This is what I want you to hear, Aries. The exposure of truth is not cruelty, it is clarity. You were not meant to build a life on blurred lines. You were not meant to keep negotiating your worth. You were not meant to keep shrinking so everything stays calm. Sometimes the calm was costing you too much. So the universe creates movement. It is not always loud, but it is always precise. It removes the mask. It pulls the curtain back. It makes the air impossible to breathe in the same way you used to. So you stop trying to survive a place that was never meant to be your home. And if you are feeling that ache right now, that mix of sadness and relief, that strange sensation of being forced forward, I need you to understand something. This is not proof that you made a mistake. This is proof that you have outgrown what used to be acceptable. You are bigger than the role you were playing, bigger than the compromise you kept calling maturity, bigger than the version of yourself that stayed quiet just to keep peace. Because Aries, you are fire, not chaos. Fire. And fire is not here to destroy you. It is here to light the way. When you are pushed out, it can feel humiliating, like you lost control, like you were not chosen, like you were replaced. But what if the push is protection? What if the door closing is mercy? What if the discomfort is the universe refusing to let you settle for less than you deserve? You do not have to demonize anyone to move on. You do not have to become hard to be free. You can leave with your heart intact. That is a kind of power most people never learn. To walk away without poisoning your own spirit. To keep your integrity even when the truth hurts. To choose a new direction without needing revenge. And I know that is not easy. Especially if you gave more than you received. Especially if you stayed longer than you should have. Especially if a part of you still hopes someone will suddenly become who you needed them to be. But you cannot heal inside the same story that keeps cutting you. So, let the truth be the turning point. Let it be the clean line in the sand. Let it be the moment you stop bargaining with your own soul. And now, Aries, as the old space starts to fall away, there is something else beginning to show up. Not as noise, not as a demand, as a quiet invitation, a question. What would your life look like if you finally chose yourself first? Aries, stay with me here. This is the part where the noise gets quiet and the truth speaks softer but clearer. The reason you've been hesitating is not because you're confused. It's because you can already feel how much would change if you actually moved. Fear doesn't show up when we're lost. It shows up when we're standing at the edge of something real. You're not afraid of leaving. You're afraid of what happens after you do. Because once you step forward, there's no familiar ground to fall back on. No script, no guarantee, just space. And space can feel terrifying when you've spent so long defining yourself by what you hold together. You ask yourself those questions late at night, not out loud, just quietly when no one is watching. What if I choose wrong? What if I lose more than I gain? What if this decision changes how people see me forever? But there's another question you haven't been letting yourself ask. What if I stay? What if you stay in the same role, the same dynamic, the same emotional posture? What does that cost you 5 years from now? 10. Because Aries, staying has a price too. It just charges you slowly. It takes pieces of you in small, invisible ways. Your excitement, your curiosity, your sense of direction. You don't notice it at first. You just feel duller, less inspired, more tired than you should be. And you start telling yourself, this is just how life is now. That wanting more is unrealistic. That this is what maturity looks like. But that's not maturity, that's resignation. True courage isn't loud. It doesn't always look bold. Sometimes it looks like sitting still and admitting you're scared. Scared of the unknown. Scared of disappointing people. Scared of stepping into a version of yourself that others might not recognize. And here's the part I want you to hold gently. You are allowed to choose yourself, even if it makes someone else uncomfortable. You are allowed to grow, even if it disrupts old expectations. You are allowed to leave without turning it into a war. Fear tells you that if you walk away, everything will collapse. But fear exaggerates. That's its nature. What actually happens is rarely as extreme as the stories fear tells. What happens instead is adjustment, recalibration, a learning curve. And yes, there may be moments of loneliness, moments of doubt, moments where you wonder if you were stronger when you stayed. But strength isn't endurance alone. Strength is discernment. It's knowing when perseverance has turned into self-abandonment. And right now, Aries, the fear you're feeling is not a warning sign. It's a doorway. It's the body's response to standing at the edge of expansion. Courage does not erase fear. It walks beside it, hand in hand, step by step. You don't have to leap. You don't have to burn bridges. You don't have to have it all figured out. You only have to be honest about what staying is costing you. Because the unknown ahead of you may feel intimidating, but the known you're standing in has already begun to dim your light. And as you sit with that truth, as you feel the weight of that realization settle, something else begins to stir beneath the fear. Not urgency, not pressure, but a quiet readiness. A sense that even if you don't know the outcome yet, you are no longer willing to betray yourself just to feel safe. And that shift, that subtle internal alignment, is where the next chapter starts to reveal itself. Aries, let's slow this moment down together. Because after all the fear, the questioning, the quiet resistance inside you, something else has begun to appear. Not loudly, not dramatically, almost shy. It shows up the way new light does at dawn, soft, barely noticeable at first. But once you see it, you cannot pretend it isn't there. There's been a subtle shift in your inner world, a change in the temperature of your thoughts. Where tension once lived, there is now curiosity. Not certainty, just curiosity. You might catch yourself imagining a different rhythm for your life, a different pace, a different way of waking up in the morning, nothing fully formed yet. Just a feeling that something new wants space to breathe. This is how beginnings actually arrive, not as answers, as invitations. You may notice it as a passing idea that makes you pause, a conversation that lingers longer than expected, a possibility that quietly refuses to leave your mind. It does not demand action. It simply asks for your attention. And that curiosity you feel, that gentle pull towards something undefined, that is not impatience. That is recognition. Because part of you already knows that the old chapter cannot stretch any further. And another part of you, the one you have not fully trusted yet, is starting to lean forward. This new energy does not rush you. It does not threaten you. It does not tell you to burn everything down. It waits. It waits for you to notice how different it feels to think about the future without dread, to imagine change without panic, to picture yourself somewhere new, and feel a quiet sense of relief instead of fear. That relief matters. It tells you that this next phase is not about proving anything. It is about aligning. You do not need a perfect plan yet. You do not need all the steps mapped out. Beginnings are rarely clean. They are curious. They are awkward. They ask you to learn as you go. And that is exactly why they feel fragile. This moment is delicate, like holding a small flame in your hands. If you squeeze too tightly, it goes out. If you ignore it, it fades. But if you protect it gently, it grows. That is your role right now. Not to decide everything, not to rush toward outcomes, just to stay open, to let yourself explore what feels lighter, to notice what brings a sense of possibility instead of obligation. To allow yourself to want what you want without immediately talking yourself out of it. This is a new cycle beginning, and every true cycle begins quietly. With a step so small, it almost feels insignificant. But do not underestimate small steps. They change direction, they shift momentum, they lead you out of places you thought you were stuck in forever. And Aries, there is something important I need you to hear here. You are not late. You have not missed your moment. You are arriving exactly when you are meant to. This seed forming inside you does not need force. It needs patience. It needs trust. It needs you to stop doubting the fact that growth can feel gentle. As you sit with this sense of beginning, as you allow curiosity to replace fear, something else begins to take shape, a subtle confidence. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that says, I may not know everything yet, but I am ready to listen. And that readiness, that calm willingness to take the next small step, is where your power starts to gather again. Because what comes next is not about starting over. It is about stepping forward with more truth than you have ever allowed yourself before. And when you are ready, we will talk about what it means to fully reclaim that power without losing the softness you have gained along the way. Aries. This is where the energy shifts, not outward, inward, because power, real power, doesn't arrive as a roar. It arrives as a return, a quiet coming back to yourself after years of standing in places that required you to dim. You were never meant to live in survival mode. You were never meant to negotiate your presence. You were never meant to make yourself smaller so others could feel comfortable staying the same. Aries is fire, but not reckless fire, guiding fire, the kind that lights the path so others can see where they are going, the kind that warms, protects, and gives life. Not the kind that burns itself out trying to keep everyone else warm. Somewhere along the way, you learned that strength meant endurance, that leadership meant carrying more than your share, that being mature meant swallowing what hurt and calling it responsibility. But that lesson has expired. Because the truth is, Aries, your power was never meant to be proven through suffering. It was meant to be expressed through direction. When you shrink, the world doesn't become safer. It becomes dimmer. When you stay silent, clarity doesn't arrive. Confusion spreads. When you tolerate what drains you, you don't create stability. You create stagnation. And I know part of you has been afraid that choosing yourself would make you cold, that stepping into your authority would cost you your kindness. But strength and gentleness are not opposites. They are partners. The strongest leaders are not the loudest ones. They are the clearest. They know who they are. They know where they are going. And they do not abandon themselves to get there. This is the lesson Aries is being asked to embody now. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself into exhaustion. You are allowed to set boundaries without apologizing for having needs. You are allowed to walk away without turning your heart to stone. Reclaiming your power does not mean hardening. It means aligning. It means choosing environments that reflect your growth. It means honoring your energy as something sacred, not disposable. It means understanding that your presence is valuable and does not need to be earned through overgiving. And here is something most people never realize. When you stand fully in your power, you don't lose people who matter. You lose roles that no longer fit. You lose dynamics built on imbalance. You lose expectations that were never fair. You lose versions of yourself that were created just to survive. And what replaces them is not emptiness. It is space. Space to breathe. Space to lead with integrity. Space to move forward without resentment dragging behind you. This is what choosing yourself actually looks like. Not dramatic exits, not scorched earth, but a steady, grounded decision to stop betraying your own truth. Aries, you do not need to fight for your worth. You do not need to prove your strength. You do not need to keep enduring to justify your place in the world. Your power has always been there. It was simply waiting for you to stop handing it away. And as you begin to stand taller inside yourself, as you feel that quiet confidence returning, something else becomes clear. This journey is not just about you. When you choose alignment over exhaustion, you give others permission to do the same. That is leadership. And now, as this realization settles into your body, as your breath deepens and your spine straightens just a little, we come to the final understanding, the one that ties everything together. Because choosing yourself is not the end of the story. It is the moment the story finally begins to move forward with you, fully inside it. Aries, let this moment land softly. If sleep has been restless lately, if your thoughts circle long after the lights are off, if you feel strangely empty even when everything looks fine on the surface, there is nothing wrong with you. This is not weakness, it is awareness. It is the quiet sound of your soul tapping on the inside of your chest, asking to be let back into the conversation. You have spent a long time being strong in ways that required silence, strong enough to endure, strong enough to adapt, strong enough to keep going even when joy felt distant. But now your spirit is asking for a different kind of strength, not the kind that pushes through, the kind that listens. Because something inside you already knows that the version of life you have been surviving is not the one you are meant to remain in. And I want you to hear this clearly, Aries. You are not being left behind. You are being guided forward. There is a difference. When something falls away, it can feel like abandonment, like rejection, like the ground has disappeared beneath your feet. But guidance often feels like loss before it reveals itself as direction. You are not losing your place in the world. You are being repositioned. You are being moved away from spaces that no longer recognize your growth, away from patterns that ask you to overextend, away from roles that kept you functioning but not fulfilled. This shift does not mean you failed. It means you listened long enough to notice that staying was costing you more than leaving ever could. And yes, change asks for trust. It asks you to loosen your grip on what is familiar even when it feels safer than the unknown. But the unfamiliar is not your enemy. It is simply unshaped potential. Something better is waiting for you. Not louder, not flashier, just more honest. A life that meets you where you are now, not where you were when you first learned how to survive. You do not need to rush toward it. You do not need to force clarity. All you need right now is the willingness to stop resisting the pull, because resistance is exhausting. Surrender is not giving up. It is allowing yourself to be carried by something wiser than fear. And if you are listening to this and feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty, that is a good sign. It means you are awake. It means you are present. It means you are no longer numbing yourself to what your inner world has been trying to say. Take a breath here. Let your shoulders drop. Let the need to have everything figured out soften. You do not have to know the entire path. You only have to trust the next honest step. And that step does not require permission. It does not require approval. It does not require you to become someone else. It only requires you to come home to yourself. So, as we close this space together, I want to leave you with this. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not asking for too much. You are responding to a call that arrives when the soul is ready to live with more truth. And the question is not whether the sign is real. You already feel that it is. The only question that remains is this. Are you willing to trust yourself this time and follow where that quiet inner knowing has been leading you all along? Aries, before you go, let me leave you with this. What if the hardest moments you've lived through lately were never meant to break you, but to wake you up? What if the pressure, the restlessness, the sleepless nights were not signs that something is wrong with you, but signs that something powerful is trying to emerge? Because here's the truth most people never hear. You are not losing anything real right now. You are shedding what can no longer follow you forward, and that takes courage, quiet courage, the kind that doesn't shout, but still changes everything. If this message touched something inside you, if it felt like it was speaking directly to your life, I want you to do one thing. Pause, breathe, and trust yourself. You don't have to have all the answers tonight. You only have to honor what you already feel. And if you're ready, leave a comment below and tell me where you're listening from, or simply write one word that describes what this moment feels like for you. You're not alone here. This is a space for Aries who are choosing growth over fear. If you want to stay connected to messages like this, subscribe to the channel, not for predictions, but for clarity, for grounding, for reminders that you're allowed to evolve. Because this is not the end of your story. This is a turning point. And the next message, the next layer, the next step in this journey is already forming. Until then, Aries, stay open, stay honest, and above all, trust yourself.